Okay, very good afternoon to you from a rainy autumnal afternoon here in Loughborough. And thanks all for attending this breakout session looking at automation in mobility and some of the human factors issues that are associated with this growing landscape. My name is Andrew Morris and I'm based at the Transport Safety Research Centre here at Loughborough University. And I'm representing the views of my colleague, Ruth Welsh, who you've already met this afternoon, and Laurie Brown. And what we're going to do this afternoon is to show some examples of human factors challenges associated with automation and mobility, and then host some question and answer session at the end of the presentation. First of all, this slide might be a bit familiar to you because this is how we started this afternoon's proceedings. It's important to reiterate how important personal mobility is to individuals in society. All of the photographs in this slide represent different modes of transport. And of course, the common thread running through each image is the presence of a human being being transported from one place to another. In some examples, the human being is in charge of the transportation type, but in other cases, the human being has the luxury of sitting back whilst being transported to his or her place of destination. Some predict that eventually, in road transport at least, we'll be travelling around in fully autonomous vehicles, which will take us to our destinations while we get on with other activities. But if we go back in time, we could probably have predicted that this is where we would end up. From the first motor vehicle, which of course was the Benz patent Motorwagen, automation has always been on the design agenda because manufacturers have progressed towards the next model as best they can with the technology that's available. Maybe because automation provides competitiveness in the marketplace, but also because technology comes along which gives us that capability to enhance functionality. And of course, this applies across the board in everyday life. We're not merely limited to transportation here. However, and as we saw earlier, it's a common assumption that automation is predominantly designed to replace human performance. And therefore, with increasing automation, there is therefore decreasing human involvement within the system. In some ways, this is true. Certainly, if we ever reach the stage of full autonomy, which some may argue may not be possible for another 30 years or so, but we argue that as we make progress towards full automation, we will need the human to stay somewhat engaged in the driving task, because essentially, the driver needs to make sure that the vehicle is behaving itself. In other words, on this progression continuum assumption, automation will not replace human performance at all. It will merely change our performance in ways we don't as yet fully understand. Some people are concerned. Some claim that we're moving too quickly. We're implementing technologies that move faster that we as researchers can react to, and in so doing, may run the risk of implementing technologies that create both intended and unintended consequences. Some say that because the technology is so new, it's too soon for us to share the roads with human drivers. Others say that by reducing human input into the driving task, we are actually altering one of the foundational pillars of society, that being the task and the skill of driving a vehicle. And if we go back to Raj Parasuraman's point, if we're changing the driving task so the vehicle is largely in control, but the driver remains responsible for its actions, we are setting up the driver with unnecessary stress. But is this too negative? Others argue we should be positively embracing about this situation, and that we should look towards the excellent track record of the aviation industry, where automation is very much at the heart of the matter, and where the safety track record is overwhelmingly compelling, with only one fatal accident per 6 million flights. Or, to look at it from another perspective, average worldwide deaths per year in commercial aviation are less than 300, whilst average deaths in worldwide road transportation are reaching around about 1.35 million per annum. So that's quite a staggering difference, as I'm sure you can appreciate. Of course, unlike road transportation, when major aviation disasters happen, they are quite rightly subjected to high levels of scrutiny. Interestingly, during inquiries that were associated with the recent Boeing 737 MAX crashes, Such scrutiny revealed that there was a greater need to examine exactly how humans interact with automated aircraft systems. And this is almost an admission that human capabilities, human fallibility, and human factors in general were not fully considered in the design in this model of aircraft. This really represents an astonishing declaration by the aviation industry, as it suggests that even in an industry where human factors are so important and so crucial to the safety of travellers, the manufacturers had not fully understood their product user capabilities and limitations. So we'd like to be confident that human factors are a primary consideration as we travel headlong and rapidly towards vehicle automation. And our view is that there are several human factors challenges that are associated with automation, some of which I've listed here and which we'll go through in more details this afternoon. Such issues, including safety, trust, user acceptance, design, and communication, are just some of the human factors worthy of exploration. Now, I'm sure you realize that this list isn't exhaustive, and there are several topics that could be added, as I'm sure some of you will immediately recognize. So let's start with safety. Overall, I think it's true to say that humans are very dangerous creatures, at least if you look at the road accident statistics. Several studies concur that human error is in some way wholly or partially responsible for around 90% of crashes. And therefore, to reduce crashes, we need to prevent humans from making the mistakes that they commonly commit on the roads. Here, technology can play a key role. And if we can implement driver assistant technology that can see faster and react quicker than the human driver, we can reduce the number of crashes on the roads, and in so doing, prevent injuries and save lives. Of course, we maybe need to define just what we mean by safety and safe. So what do those terms actually mean in everyday life situations? Does safe just mean flawless driving, or just better driving than a human is capable of? The Rand Corporation has an opinion here. They believe that a fleet of, say, 100 vehicles would need to drive around 275 million miles between them without failure to be as good as a human driver in terms of numbers of fatal crashes. And some of you may remember the first fatal crash involving a Tesla vehicle in the United States, which is thought to have been caused by the vehicle driving on autopilot with the system not recognizing the presence of an adjacent large truck on the freeway. And as a consequence, the Tesla collided with the underside of the truck. At the time of this unfortunate accident, Tesla car owners had only logged around 130 million miles in the autopilot mode. So according to the Rand Corporation's assertion, this was not enough. Waymo, of course, manufacturers of the Google car, have more miles under their collective belts and have a very good safety track record. In fact, their data suggests that they have by far the lowest at-fault rate of any driver class. Interestingly, though the Google car was found to be prone to suffering minor crashes, mainly involving other at-fault vehicles or at-fault drivers. And if you look at the data involving the Google car, the explanation appears to be that the Google car adheres to the road rules with absolute compliance. So whereas many of us would probably drive through an amber light at a road junction, the Google car will always stop when it receives the amber light, even if this means sharp braking. And it's quite easy to see how human drivers who might expect this sudden braking action might struggle to avoid a collision. Trust is also a very important issue with regard to automation in any walk of life, and it's no different for transport. The data on trust and vehicle automation are not overwhelmingly supportive at the moment. One recent survey of 4,000 people in the United States found that around about 50% of respondents would feel unsafe or very unsafe in a self-driving car, and less than a quarter in the same survey so that they will feel safe. Also, not as many respondents actually found the prospect of being in a self-driving car very appealing. In fact, nearly 70% of respondents found it either unappealing or very unappealing. This is quite a surprising finding in many respects. However, again, we come back to the aviation industry as a comparator. And it took us many years before most people lost the fear of being rocketed through the stratosphere at 500 miles per hour in a pressurized tube propelled by exploding jet fuel. However, as we know, most present-day air travelers will not even bother with watching the safety announcements and will continue to work during flights as if it's perfectly normal for humans to fly. But nevertheless, this trust has taken many years to develop, and it is in part due to the excellent safety track record that the industry, or the aviation industry, can lay claim to. Okay, let's have a look at your daily car commute. You have a daily car commute with a lady called Sandra, who drives you. She's been driving you for the best part of 20 years. She is a very safe driver. She's got a very good safety track record. You trust Sandra to the nth degree. You know that you are like to reach your destination very safely. All of a sudden, it appears that Sandra is off sick for one reason or another, and you find yourself having to share a car with Jack. Now, you don't know Jack very well, but you know he lives somewhere near you, and Jack has agreed to fill in for Sandra for the next couple of weeks. You get into the car. Jack is very nervous. He's very uncertain. He looks like he's just passed his test. And you started to realize, who do you trust more in this particular situation, Sandra or Jack? And would you trust the driving style of either Sandra or Jack, or another driver altogether? And the point is, with all of this, is that you don't know whether your autonomous vehicle's driving style will resemble that of either Jack or Sandra. And we don't know how this is going to affect our trust in automation. We simply don't know these sorts of questions. For us as researchers, the issues of safety and trust clearly manifest themselves in several use cases, which we might want to explore further. And takeover requests are a major issue that are undergoing a lot of attention within both the research community and the industry. And one such use case involves drivers' capability to re-engage with the driving task after a short period of slumber, which you might want to do when your driver or your vehicle is driving you to your destination. If the driver is in very deep sleep, when the vehicle confronts a situation it can't cope with, and it needs to hand back control, whilst the driver could adjust his or her position quite rapidly in response, it could take several seconds longer before the driver is sufficiently awake to cope with the cognitive demands of the driving task. How long is this period, and how does it affect overall safety? Some interesting and demanding questions are evident here that require further research within the Human Factors Lab. Automated transport could provide all sorts of opportunities in terms of personal mobility. For example, those with impairments and disabilities, and even older drivers who no longer feel capable of driving safely. Amongst others, this is an important issue to those who are perhaps living relatively remotely from shops and services, and could be conceivably considered as socially isolated. Safe and reliable mobility systems could reduce the challenge of social isolation within society, and could significantly improve the quality of life for a significant population sector. However, what we don't really understand as yet is whether the target population will be prepared to use automated future transport systems with the frequency that we would want. So we do have the dilemma that if we introduce such systems, would they be used? Another issue we're interested to explore is how future vehicles will be designed for users to undertake non-driving related tasks. If, as several are predicting, users will have more time on their hands to do other things while the vehicle drives itself, what will this mean in terms of the design of the vehicle interiors and the alternative safety requirements? First of all, the vehicle occupants will need to have the vehicle designs and the interior that will facilitate tasks such as reading, working on laptops, even relaxing. And secondly, whilst in relaxation mode, the safety design needs to change because at present, vehicle safety systems are optimally designed around a 50 percentile male human seated in an upright driving position. When they are slouched in the relaxation position, the safety systems might not work as effectively. So here is another use case that we can investigate in our human factors laboratory. If future autonomous vehicles do crash, how can we ensure that children, elderly, impaired, and other vulnerable vehicle occupants are protected when they could be seated in what could be considered to be non-standard seating positions, which are not currently tested within current regulatory compliance testing protocols? It also suggests that there's a need to rethink the utilization of the vehicle interior so that it can be more comfortable and can accommodate secondary non-driving tasks such as reading and even watching movies, and is safe for a different range of occupants in all sorts of positions in the event that crashes occur. And both of these use cases can be addressed through research within the Human Factors Lab. Another vehicle human factors challenge, which is evidenced within the research community, involves that of communication between the vehicle and the other road users. And again, there is quite a fair amount of research being devoted to this particular conundrum. The problem is that at the moment, there is an explicit unofficial code of conduct for communication between road users, as anybody who's flashed their lights to let somebody out of a road junction will know. With automation, of course, this code of conduct is unlikely to exist. Some studies have already looked at the most effective method of vehicle communication, where the vehicle is trying to communicate intention to the other road users so that they can anticipate, for example, safe road crossing, safe right turning during congestion, etc. However, the research as it stands is still underdeveloped, and therefore we need further research to look at vehicle to pedestrian and vehicle to cyclist. Some technology exists which uses dedicated short-range communication technology built into both vehicles and the smartphones of pedestrians, alerting drivers and pedestrians to potential hazards. But I think it's important that we have further research to ensure that the technology is valid and reliable. And again, this is the type of research that can be undertaken within the Human Factors Lab. Finally, I think it's quite important to look ahead and consider the human factors challenges that are associated with the people who are monitoring the traffic flows, looking for congestion, hazards, accidents, etc. There will clearly be lots of human factors issues when we have fleets of vehicles such as pods and shuttles with somebody overseeing them from a control room, simply because humans are generally thought to be quite bad at remote operation and are prone to fatigue, distraction, and other forms of human error. And this shifting from driver to monitor still relies on humans, and with this are a range of human factors issues that we need to be aware of in the years ahead. There are several human factors challenges that we've not discussed today, simply because we've only got so much time and the challenges are so vast. But many are related to the simple task of driving, including situation awareness, risk-taking, trust, misuse, everyday issues that may impact on the safety of all road users, regardless of whether they are inside or outside of the vehicle. And there are a range of legal and ethical issues that we're just starting to get to grips with. And some of these are proving to be quite under-researched and are going to require the development of new knowledge and insights through human factors research. So just to summarize, I think it's true to say that humans will have a large role to play in mobility, despite the rapid and non-stop progress towards automation. It's almost relentless in some ways. But we need to be aware that humans are fallible, and the types of mistakes that humans will make will not change, even with increasing automation, because we are all human after all. Several potential issues are already evident, which we've discussed in this session. Some remain as yet undiscovered, but may manifest themselves further down the line. And as we progress towards automation, mixed vehicle capabilities will further compound the problem even further, because we expect a period of relative turmoil whilst the transition is made from manual to automation. But it's true to say that human factors research is necessary to smooth the way forward and to ensure that future mobility is safe, effective, and usable by all. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation today. I hope that you found it interesting, and if you have any questions, we've allocated a bit of time for a question and answer session. So do please take part in this if you would like to. Thank you. So we have a question from Alan about road vehicle manufacturers being unaware of human factors and whether they override them for commercial reasons. I think the manufacturers tend to be quite well on top of the human factors issues that are evident in smart mobility and vehicle automation. But new challenges are being uncovered every day, and I don't think it's possible to understand what they all are until we understand how users are going to use these particular vehicles. And the only way that you can do that is through on-road testing. That's quite a difficult activity to perform, but it has been achieved in some ways through on-road naturalistic driving trials, field operational tests. I think if you just put a driver in a situation where they're going to drive around a test track, we're not going to discover as many of the human factors challenges that might be evident when you've got people driving around in live fleets. Question from Natasha about the comparison of cars and airplanes. There are very, very different modes of transport, and there are different regulations governing both transport modes. I agree with that, where you've got the drivers in charge of vehicles who are not very well trained in comparison to pilots. But I think we can learn lessons from the aviation industry in the way that they progress towards automation and the strategies and the safety innovations that they've introduced. I think there's a lot of learning that we could apply when we head towards the automation situation. Question from Nick: how do autonomous vehicles progress through busy pedestrian-rich streets, which appear to be with random pedestrian movements, not always entirely on footways? This is a very good question indeed, and one we've been trying to think about, because we know that some vehicles are designed to brake in these types of situations. So first of all, the vehicles have to have very good predictive capability built upon them in order to understand what the pedestrians are going to do in any given situation. I'm not sure there's an easy answer to the crowd pedestrian situation, and I'm not sure that we've done enough testing in live roadways to understand whether the systems that are currently on board vehicles will be able to cope with those very live traffic situations. The only thing we can do is really to do more testing to make sure that systems will perform in the effective and valid ways that we think they will. There's a very good question here from Lawrence Clift about whether we'd reach the point at which governments will have to scrap all non-autonomous vehicles for the safety of other road users and to facilitate implementation, and how soon could this be? I think the danger period for us is in automation is when we reach the point where we've got lots of automated vehicles and lots of non-automated vehicles in the same fleet, and we don't understand the capabilities of the two vehicles and the mismatch between them. And I think that point will be reached at some stage, and what we do at that point is going to be quite challenging. Yes, the ideal situation would be to take all the non-autonomous vehicles off the road and replace them with a wholly autonomous fleet. But of course, that's going to be costly, and whether we could afford to do that remains to be seen. The other thing that's of interest, and I think is something that's been talked about, is a situation where you have vehicle ownership changing quite radically. So people will not own their autonomous vehicles, they'll merely lease them. So if you want to go on a journey, you'll sit at home, summons your autonomous vehicle to your door, you'll get in your car will drop you your destination, and then your car will move off somewhere else. And so you won't actually own the car. This means that there'll be fewer cars on the road because there'll be lots of car sharing activity happening. And this means that maybe we can go from one situation where we've got lots of non-autonomous vehicles and replace them with a smaller fleet. So we've got a car sharing situation coping for the needs of all travellers. So there's a question from Alan about the issues we're discussing are good research questions. Are we seeking research funding? Well, of course, we're always seeking research funding, but we want to do good quality research that has a purpose. So I guess our main mission statement is that we want to do research that has an impact on real world situations. So we're not looking to do research for research's sake. We like to do research that is relevant to the current topic. So smart mobility is such an important issue in our eyes, and we see the safety of this particular movement as being so critical that we want to get the safety of these systems right, and that is our main research goal. There's a question about studies going on to find out whether people's attitudes to trust and safety change after being in an autonomous vehicle. I think there is a little bit of data on this, and it's not overwhelmingly compelling, unfortunately. Even though if you ask a person whether they'd like to own an autonomous vehicle, having never experienced one, majority of people say they would rather not, just yet until the technology has been perfected. Having been in an autonomous vehicle, those that are fully autonomous, I think there's still a little bit of hesitation on people's part to adopt an autonomous vehicle until we can see that the track record or the safety track record of these systems is what we expect it to be. And that is a situation where no crashes are going to happen. So that's going to be quite a difficult situation to achieve. Okay, a comment here about those who drive not out of necessity but for pleasure. This is generational, but there are younger generations who like to drive and buy expensive cars. And this goes back to one of the points that was made in the presentation about the whole of automation and changing the foundational pillars of society. We're taking away, perhaps in some ways, one of the pleasures in life that people have, which is to simply get in a car and drive. And many people like to do that. It's a skill that we acquire over many months. And once we've got that skill, we like to implement it. There are several enthusiastic car owners who go to car rallies, who just like to go for a drive on a Sunday afternoon, simply because they like to drive a car. I really hope that as we progress headlong into automation, we don't take this pleasure away from people, because I still think that people will want to do this, even when we have fully autonomous vehicles. And I guess the question is, how are we going to mix up the fleets when you've got large populations of autonomous vehicles and the non-autonomous vehicles at the same time? Okay, I think we've reached the end of this session, so I'd just like to thank you all very much again for attending the session. These are our views on some of the leading questions related to vehicle automation and the challenges that are associated with it. Thank you all for listening. I wish you all a very good afternoon, and do keep in touch. Thank you. Goodbye.